Would you class that as meditation or not?
I would class that as a tool that can be used in a meditative lifestyle. As far as like a form of meditation, that's kind of debatable, depending on who you're talking to. But I do think that using visualization can...
Welcome to another episode of They Not Like Us. And today we've got an incredible conversation lined up. But before we dive in, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on the powerful stories, insights, and advice we bring to you every week. And let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, welcome back to They Not Like Us. I'm your host, Aaron, and today I'm joined by Jeff Patterson. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Pleasure's mine. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. So I'm here in Portland, Oregon. I've been running a martial arts academy and meditation center here in Portland now for a little over 30 years. I can't believe it's gone by that quick. I've been fortunate to have just a real great community around me. Through the last 30 years, I've had over 26,000 students come through the academy. So had a pretty big family here. I've had students that have been with me here now for over 30 years. So it's really kind of my second family. I was just out of the country for a couple weeks, and last week I'm just thinking about getting back here to see everybody. And so it's a pretty great place. I've been really passionate about teaching the meditative arts because I've seen so many positive changes through the years. I've had not only the students coming through the academy, but through my online programs. And I've heard hundreds of stories through the years on how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives in many different directions. And that's what kind of has given me the energy and the focus to really try to spend my efforts in getting this message out there.
Yeah, what drew you to meditation in the first place then, Jeff?
I got introduced to meditation in a bit of a roundabout way. I was a pretty young guy, around 19 years old. And I was very much into Western boxing. And I used to go to a boxing gym that's just a few blocks down the street here from my academy in Portland. And at a boxing gym, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, they run the center's a lot different than your normal style fitness class where you would go in and there'd be an instructor or a coach and the whole class would follow. Whereas in a boxing gym, there might be 3, 4, or 5 coaches, and each one of those coaches has a few fighters that they're working with, and that's who they really focus on. Well, at this one particular gym, one of the coaches there was a very well-known coach. He had created some very high-level boxers, both amateur and professional, and I really wanted to get to spend some time with him. And so I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and work hard and let him know that I wanted to spend some time with him. And after following him around for about 3 or 4 months, he finally started giving me some tips and helping me out a little bit. And it was only maybe 2 or 3 weeks of getting to work with him when he told me something that changed my life forever. And that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time, I'm this 19-year-old kid who doesn't know much of anything, thinking, isn't Tai Chi for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? And I had a lot of respect for him, though, and I decided to take on the practice. And it's changed my life in many ways. And through the years, as I mentioned, I've seen, many students be influenced by the practice. And it's been a pretty positive force in my life.
Yeah, it's I suppose 30 years ago it would have been even sort of less prevalent. I think there's more acceptance and more, people see more value in meditation now than they did maybe 30 years ago, where it was probably not talked about as much and, probably not understood. I suppose in the 30 years ago as well, the kind of the mental health aspect of it would have been like, well, just man up and get on with it kind of thing as well. But you've seen that change over the 30 years that you've been doing it.
Yeah, it's people are a lot more open to the practice these days, and which is great. The thing, one of the things now that it's so widespread, there's all these apps out there and these programs in this direction and that, and while it's great and I love seeing that energy in this direction, the thing that comes up is that we already have so many distractions in life. We're this kind of society now that wants everything fast, and you learn a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And you get these people that get into the practice that don't have a guide or somebody helping them along the way. And they'll learn a little bit of this practice and a little bit of that practice. And, it's kind of like they never get out of the first grade level into the meditative arts. And really, it's meant to be a life practice and an evolving life practice that's always getting deeper and deeper. And that's something that I've always tried to be very disciplined with as a teacher, to really point students on that path so they can see the true benefits of what the meditative arts has to bring.
Yeah, we're in that world of instant gratification now, aren't we? Where everybody wants, the results straight away, and it's, things don't work that way. Where anything worth having, takes a bit of investment, a bit of time, and some effort, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, you can become pretty educated by reading books and watching videos, but you just because you can talk about it doesn't mean you feel it, and what gets you to a high level in any meditative art, whether it is a sitting practice, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, a standing meditation, a walking meditation series, whatever it is that you're doing, to really get to a profound, deep level in the practice is getting to a deeper level of feeling. It's kind of like a musician. If you're learning to play the guitar, I could have you memorize 30 different chords in a couple days. You could memorize, A chord, C chord, D chord. But you take an experienced musician that's really well versed on the guitar, you give them 3 chords and they'll make it sound like it's magic. And that's what the idea is with the meditative arts, is we want to have that root and that depth in the practice, and not just a lot of things spinning around on the surface.
Jeff, what is meditation then? Because I think it's important to talk about that, because there's, like you say, there's different practices and different ways that people can meditate, and I think a lot of us who are maybe ignorant to the practices, or have just seen snippets of stuff kind of on TV or on the internet, will just assume that it's all just sitting there cross-legged on the floor with your eyes closed and maybe humming. You know what I mean? The traditional kind of image that people get, I suppose.
Yeah, so when I talk about the meditative arts, I'm kind of all inclusive in any practices that I would consider part of a meditation lifestyle. And some are more geared towards deeper states of meditation, some are more towards mindfulness, some are more towards just integrating some of these active practices into your life. So, I break down meditation into kind of 3 basic categories. You have your ritual practices, your active practices, and your philosophical practices. Ritual practices are when you set time aside every day and you do a little bit of a isolated practice away from any audios, away from any videos, where you just turn inward and focus on yourself. Then there's active practices that you can do when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store, and they can be as simple as counting out 10 breaths or doing some spinal rotations, or a simple movement practice to help stay present and aware in that kind of meditative mindset, if you will. And then lastly, we have our philosophical practices, which are a very deep path to follow, where we work on different things that kind of help us think strategically and help us understand, our thoughts and emotions, and how to integrate that into our own interpersonal communication, but then also with others, and how to redirect things towards a positive direction as we're communicating. And so there's a lot of different practices that we would include in that. And I break that down really into 5 categories of meditation, where you have what I call the athletic side of the practice, or physical side of the practice, where you'll see high level athletes these days, a lot of them now are turning to the meditative arts and to breath work to help improve their performance. And then we have the therapeutic side of the practice, which is good for keeping the body healthy, flexible, and strong, and our awareness, working through injuries and that kind of thing. Then there's the medical side of the practice. And the medical side of the practice, if you're familiar with Chinese medicine, is based off of Qigong theory. So that's a very deep pillar of practice as well. We already kind of mentioned the philosophical side of the practice. And then lastly, there's the spiritual side of the practice, which is what most people, I think of when they hear the idea of meditation. So on those 5 different directions of the practice, you could literally spend the rest of your life down any one of those paths working to build a life practice with the meditative arts.
Yeah, it's quite interesting some of the things you're saying there as well about how the athletes use it. Um, I've worked with quite a few athletes, and I was big into sport myself, and used to do visualization. Would you class that as a form of meditation as well? Where you close your eyes, visualize what's about to come, and you kind of calm your mind and go through that kind of stuff. Would you class that as meditation or not?
I would class that as a tool that can be used in a meditative lifestyle. As far as like a form of meditation, that's kind of debatable, depending on who you're talking to. But I do think that using visualization can help us reach deeper levels in our meditation practice. And so there is a lot of visualization in any kind of meditation journey.
Yeah, and I think the power of the mind is quite amazing as well, right? Because I mean, you just look at the placebo effect, and it shows how effective that thought process can be, and having that kind of, I don't want to say control of your mind, but that kind of exploring your mind, and kind of finding that level of peace and calm there.
Yeah, and part of it is, when we talk about building a life practice in the meditative arts, and this doesn't mean, it could mean any direction of practice, whether you're doing a yoga practice, a Tai Chi practice, you're doing a sitting meditation series or a standing meditation, whatever that is for you. There's what I call the 5 regulations. And in those 5 regulations, they're the core fundamental foundation that you want to cultivate for any practice that you were going to take up. And they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. Briefly, I'll kind of touch on what I mean by that. So when we talk about regulating the body, on a surface level, a couple examples I'll give you that will describe kind of these different energetic states. One would be, think about you're sitting down at your computer for 4 or 5 hours and your shoulders are rounded forward and you're feeling lethargic and just trying to keep your eyes open and really just at this low energetic state. And then another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and your energy feels like you're on top of the world. Well, these 2 different energetic states we're in 100% control of all day, every day. And so understanding how to regulate our body and our muscular tension and our skeletal alignment is very important. On a little bit of a deeper level in the body regulation, we get into maintaining some sort of muscular strength, working on our flexibility, making sure we're getting the proper diet and sleep so we can be healthy and have that energy. Then we have regulating the breath. Regulating the breath is an extremely deep topic and something that you'll study for the rest of your life if you take on a meditation practice. And in fact, in Qigong, it's often referred to as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies that you can do with a Qigong practice. Now, by integrating these different breathing strategies, we want to learn how to use them strategically so we can get different outcomes. And because there's so many different styles of breathing, we kind of broadly categorize them into yin methods and yang methods. Yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of breathing meditations. An example of a yin breath would be if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so if we want to emulate this style of breath in our meditations, we can do longer inhales, maybe soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward, which is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, improving our creativity and our focus. Then we have the yang side of the breath, which is more aggressive. And an example of this would be if you ever had to push your car or you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is exhale, put tension in the breath, maybe make the breath audible, and this helps generate energy and power. Now, when we start understanding how to use this breath strategically, we can use it to adjust our physical, mental, and emotional states throughout the day. We all go through emotional ups and downs. Some people are like a roller coaster, others maybe a little bit more balanced. But when you start seeing yourself start to get a little bit excited, we can use the breath, the yin side, to help bring us back down. When we see ourselves starting to feel depleted, we can use the yang breath to help bring us back up. And so now we can find more balance throughout the day, which helps us stay more centered, more focused, and also more energetic in anything that we do. And so the breath is a very important tool as we start to develop a meditation practice. Then we have regulating the mind. Regulating the mind, again, just like the breath, is a lifelong practice. And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is, I've tried meditation, but I just couldn't quiet my mind. It doesn't work for me. And somewhere along the way, people got this misconception that in order to be successful in meditation, that you need to be in this state of nirvana where nothing can affect you, and it couldn't be further from the truth. I've been traveling around the world studying with teachers all over the planet, some really well-known high-level meditation practitioners, and I have never once met anybody who doesn't get distracted. We're all human. We all get distracted. That's part of the practice. But the idea is that we're able to recognize these distractions. And so say you're doing a sitting meditation for 20 minutes, and maybe you get distracted 50 times during that session. Every time you recognize that distraction or imbalance, we use our posture, we use our breath, we use the movement, if it's a movement practice, to help bring us back to focus. And now we just got 50 repetitions of being distracted and coming back to center. And if you do that every day, every week, every month, every year, you start to develop this power and this ability that no matter what happens to you, if somebody says something to throw you off your game, or you have a bad day at work, or whatever it is, that you're able to bring yourself back to that center position. And it doesn't mean that you're never going to be discouraged, because we all are. But when you can approach a problem from a balanced state of mind rather than an excited or unsettled state of mind, we can respond from a lot better place. There's this story that I love about these two old monks, and they're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm. They come up to this mud puddle, and on the other side of this puddle is this beautiful little girl, and she's standing there in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older monk, he yells across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs, he walks across the puddle and picks her up, puts her on his back, and takes her to the other side, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious, and he says, we're not supposed to touch girls, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we finally realize that maybe this is something we should let go of? And, so learning how to regulate the mind and be aware of these imbalances is foundational in our development with the meditative arts. Then we have regulating the energy. Regulating the energy is another very deep topic and something that we could literally talk hours about. But just a brief explanation of it is, once you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, you have the ability now to direct the energy in the body and lead it inward, extend it outwards, circulate it in the body to help us get different outcomes. And as we get into higher level meditation practices, we'll do a lot of this kind of work. Then lastly, we have regulating the spirit, which is a very profound idea. And it's something that, meditation masters and monks will spend their entire lifetime working towards that ultimate stage of enlightenment. And so when you have these 5 foundational principles, you can see that by cultivating these areas, it can affect any area you have in life and make anything better by incorporating this practice.
Absolutely. I think there's so much value in it, and it actually reminds me of a quote. So when I was looking into meditation a little bit before the show, I found a quote that said, "True meditation isn't the sitting; it's in how we choose to live our lives moment by moment." So it kind of comes back to what you're saying about that kind of bringing us back to that balance and that place of peace, really, I suppose.
Yeah, it really is meant to be a life practice. And it's one of those things where, it seems kind of almost a little silly, if you will, to think that, yeah, I can go meditate and be peaceful for 20 minutes or an hour. And then the rest of the day, I'm stressed out and worried about everything. And you don't have any balance in the rest of your life. If you want to get to a really deep level of practice in your meditation, then you need to learn how to live that lifestyle and really improve that awareness in everything you do. And part of that is just being able to be in tune with your physical state, your mental state, and your emotions, and really be able to look at yourself and see how things truly are, how you're really taking things. Because if you don't see those things in yourself, then you're never going to be able to guide them to that direction that you want to take it.
Yeah, and I learned something a while ago, and I can't remember where I got it from, but it's really helped me with my life and the way I look at things. Um, and it's we can't control. So we all have this kind of inner monologue, right? And we'll have it when we try to find moments of peace. We'll still have that running. We can't stop the thoughts coming into our head, but we can choose not to cling on to them, not to act on them, or not to let them affect us. We can just be aware of them and kind of let them pass through, and just the next thought will come, and and find peace in that kind of way. And that's really helped me a lot in my life.
Nice.
So I've never actually tried any kind of meditative practices that I know of, that not deliberately anyway. But I do have I'm quite interested in Tai Chi, so I've always been interested in martial arts, and I did karate all through my younger years, and I was kind of a bit of a bond I had with my grandfather, who was into martial arts, and he did Tai Chi when he was older, when he wasn't as physically able to do the more intense stuff. But I've never tried it. I've always had an interest in it, and I'd like to hear a bit more about that if I can, Jeff.
Yeah, so Tai Chi and Qigong, any of more of the movement meditative practices are extremely valuable because we mentioned talking about like being aware and seeing things inside of ourselves. So many people are not in touch with how they move in their physical state. Sometimes I'll be teaching people a standing meditation practice, and I'll have a room of maybe 30 people, and we'll have our arms up in this, embracing the tree position, and their shoulders are almost touching their ears. And I'll tell them to relax their shoulders, and they'll say they are relaxed. And then I'll touch them and move them down 2 inches because they just don't even really realize where they are. And having that awareness and that ability to be in tune with the body is very helpful, because when we start to see things in how we're holding tension in the body and our skeletal alignment and our breath and these things that come from the practice, help us now not only recognize the physical imbalances, but they also help us recognize the mental and emotional imbalances. And when we can see things at a higher level and notice them before they start gaining too much momentum, it's one thing if you're standing around with your shoulders jacked up to your ears and you do that all day, you're going to have a stiff neck and you're maybe even lead to headaches. But when you could recognize the first sign of your skeleton not being aligned and not being relaxed, we can make that adjustment, and it never goes that far down that path. And so having that ability to make that connection is very important. And a lot of people these days, I bet if you were to gather up all of the Tai Chi and Qigong schools in the US, I bet it's less than 5% of them that even understand how to use it as a martial art. Most people practice Tai Chi and Qigong now for the health benefits because there's so many health and meditative benefits to the practice. Now, there also is a martial element of that. And, Tai Chi was originally created as a martial art, and they used to train the army using Tai Chi. But they had found that, when Buddha Dhammo came over from India and he saw these monks that were training these combat practices and saw that they were broken and beat up, the story is, in history, is that he integrated some of these Qigong practices in the health side of the practice. And so they started being more vibrant and healthy and getting injured less. And then that kind of started to take over the practice. And through the years, more and more people adapted the practices for the health side of the practice.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I found a couple of research articles actually, but one by the American Heart Association that said that meditation's been shown to. It doesn't state in this study how long you need to be practicing it for, but it says that it reduces blood pressure, lowers cortisol levels, and decreases the risk of heart disease over time as well. So it's there's evidence there as well to support not just anecdotal stuff. There's actual evidence to support that this has an improvement on our physical health, not just our mental state.
Oh, there's been hundreds of studies by very reputable people. There's one study that I'm really impressed with, in that, a lot of people, as we age, we start forgetting things. Our mind's not as sharp as it once was. And they've made the connection, a big part of that is in our breath. Also, as we age, we start to use less and less of our lung capacity. And, the average person in the US actually only uses 40 to 60% of their lung capacity. So Harvard did this study on breath, and what they did is they took a bunch of elderly patients who were showing signs of memory loss and early dementia and early Alzheimer's disease. And they taught them how to do these deep breathing exercises, and they put them into oxygen chambers, and they had them practicing these deep breathing techniques. And after a very short amount of time, all of them across the board averaged 30% more in their ability to memorize things. And so this one idea of using the meditative practice to help improve our oxygen carbon dioxide exchange and improving our breath capacity, that should be reason enough for anybody to do the practice, just so we can stay more competent into our later years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I found another study by Harvard neuroscientists. Actually, there's a second one that after 8 weeks of mindfulness and meditation, they put the people through a program, increased the grey matter density in the hippocampus, which essentially is where you do all your learning and your memories. And they state that people's memories improved from that 8 weeks of mindfulness and meditation.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, there's endless studies on it. And now these days it's a lot easier to convince people. For me as an instructor, the hard part is getting people to understand the importance of being consistent and getting some depth in the practice. And so anytime somebody new comes to the practice, and for any of you out there that may be thinking about wanting to start a meditation practice, or maybe you've tried before and it just didn't work for you, or you didn't stick with it, I have a little thing that I have people do and think about when they're taking on the practice that I find to be really helpful and can help improve your success in the practice. And there are three things that I like them to think about. And the first one is, why do you want to take on the practice? Do you want to stay healthier into your old age and stay vibrant so you can play with your grandkids? Or are you dealing with stress and anxiety? Or do you have panic attacks and you want to learn how to overcome them and to be more in control of your life? Or maybe you're an athlete and you want to improve your performance on the field. Whatever that is for you, think about that why, and then think about the things that will happen by accomplishing that why. So if I do this, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z, and all of these reasons. So you have some motivation there. And then also think about, if I don't get this, I'm also going to get A, B, and C, So you think about the negative things that are going to come from not doing it and the positive things. And this helps give you the fuel and the motivation to do the practice, which leads to the second thing that's important to think about, which is consistency, because you have to do a little bit every day to really start to build the momentum. And so I always tell students when they come in that you want to commit to 20 minutes a day for your ritual practice and integrate some active practices into your life. And through this consistency, you develop this discipline, this integrity, this perseverance that feeds over into everything else in your life and really starts to give you the benefits of what a meditation practice has to offer. And then lastly is, you need to find yourself a good guide and somebody that can help point you in the right direction. Because as I mentioned earlier, there's so many distractions out there and people doing this and that and the other. And if you think that you can be self-taught and learn this practice, I've been studying now for 36 years and I'm still just a student learning all the time. I'm far from being the master. And if you think you can do it on your own, you're really misguided. I've had students come into the academy here that have been self-taught and they've been going for 10, 15, even 20 years. And they'll come in and see one of the students here who's been around for 6 months, 12 months, who's further along in their practice than they are after 15 or 20 years. And it's really kind of discouraging, and life is short, your time is valuable, and finding a good guide is not that difficult. Find somebody that you resonate with that helps point you in the right direction, and you'll see so much more value out of your time and really start to get to the benefits of the meditative arts a lot faster if you do this.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think ultimately it's a skill that you're trying to develop, isn't it, really, to be able to do it, or a number of skills, really. And it's the same as anything else. I mean, there's always outliers with, people who teach themselves to play guitar and stuff like that, but generally it's much more difficult, and it takes a lot longer if you do ever get there. And having an instructor or a coach, somebody to help you develop, show you things, question things, make you think about things in a different way. You can't, like, I don't think you can get that from just being on the internet and just kind of researching it. I think you need that two-way conversation to really kind of develop what you're doing and bring it on.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think, there's some people out there, like you said, the outliers that are very disciplined and they'll focus on something and they'll get to a competent level. But you can imagine that person spends, say, 10,000 hours to get to whatever point they're at. Imagine if they had a really good guide spending that same 10,000 hours. I bet they'd be twice as far along, because you you have somebody that's invested 20, 30, 40 years of their life into doing something and they're very competent, and you're starting from scratch and don't really know anything. You could be disciplined and eventually get somewhere, but if they can point all the shortcuts out to you and help you get there a lot quicker, it can really save you a lot of time.
Absolutely. And I think the value in coaching is that two-way conversation, that individual, personal, I'm struggling with this, or this is my specific issue, and you can kind of engage that together. I think that's much more valuable than just reading kind of cookie cutter information off the internet, or watching like a cookie cutter video that shows you the basics, but you might be struggling with a specific element and it doesn't necessarily touch on that.
Yes.
So knowing that meditation is growing and stuff like that, and it's getting bigger, how would you encourage somebody to start if they're thinking, oh, I know nothing about it, I'd like to start? What would you suggest for them people? Maybe the ones that are a little bit reluctant as well, to thinking, I'm not sure about it.
So I always tell people to try to find something that is going to be fun for them, and some people are really not in the mental space to sit for 20 minutes yet. They haven't developed that kind of patience. So for that kind of person, I would recommend maybe doing some Tai Chi or doing some Qigong or something where there's some slow movement going through and learning the breath work through the movement practices to help reach those different states of meditation. And then eventually you might integrate some standing meditation or some sitting meditation and approach it that way. Find something that you're going to enjoy, because it's going to become part of your life. And there's so much depth to the practice. As I mentioned, I've been studying for a long time and I'm still learning every day. I feel like I'm as much of a student now as I was 20 years ago. And it really is a deep practice. And so there's something for everybody. And if you have a strong why and you understand where you want to go with the practice, you can integrate the practices that are going to help you on that path. And when you start seeing the positive outcomes come from these practices and these efforts that you're doing, now it stops looking at as you stop looking at it like it's a chore that you got to do every day, and more as it's something, hey, I get to do this, and you get excited about doing it. I've been I have had a daily ritual for many years, and I haven't missed a day of my daily ritual since I had my hip surgery 5 years ago. And I don't plan on missing a day anytime soon. And so it's one of those things that I don't look at that as a chore. I look at that as something that's fun that I get to do, that I know is beneficial towards my future development in anything that I do.
Yeah, it's important that I suppose it probably takes a little while to get to that point, isn't it? It's like it's the same with me. I go to the gym, and that's kind of my escape, and it helps my mental health and everything else. But at the start, it wasn't that. It's kind of developed into that over time because I've stuck to it. I've developed. I've got better at it, and now if I don't do it, I really miss it, and it affects me negatively.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is something that comes with time. Some people pick it up quick and they start seeing the benefits right away, and others take a little bit longer. But if you have that good, strong why, it helps you get through those times of confusion and those distractions, and you just kind of push through until you really get to that point.
Do you see any kind of common reasons why people do kind of quit when they're in that point, when they've not quite got to the point where they're seeing the benefit, where they're getting that routine and it's becoming part of what they do?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I see people quitting from is they'll start the practice with good intentions, but they never make the commitment and the consistency to see the benefits from the practice. As I said, I've been running this academy for 30 years, and of the students that come in here that listen to our recommendation of doing a 20-minute a day ritual and integrating active practices into their life and doing that every day, if they keep up with that for a year, I bet an extremely high percentage, 95% or more, will do this practice for the rest of their life, because they'll see so many benefits from the practice that they would be crazy to stop. And that's why I have students that have been with me for 30 years, in that it's, once you get to that point and you see that, there's so many good things that come from it. The ones that quit are the ones that try it out for 2 weeks and they're like, this is hard, I'm not seeing anything. And then they give up too soon. And it's kind of part of, unfortunately, a way that society has come and, lately, is that if it doesn't fix it tomorrow, it's not going to work for me, and with that kind of mindset, you're really going to miss out on a lot. I play music too, and I've been playing guitar now for almost 30 years. And man, I was horrible the first couple years I played. You couldn't get any worse than I was. And if I didn't stick with it and keep that consistency, I never would have gotten good. And if you want to have health into your later years, and you want to have that peace of mind and that control and that awareness in your body and your mental and physical states, you got to work for it, and you got to put that time in. And as a teacher, I want nothing more than to see my students reap the benefits of the practice. But I can't do the work for you. You got to get out there and put the time in. And if you do, it'll be one of the best things you've ever done for yourself. But you've got to find what that motivation is for you to make it work for you.
Yeah, and Jeff, it brings me to something you said earlier on, but you said it a couple of times about understanding your why as well. Because if you know why you're doing something, and you kind of have a bit of direction, okay, there's going to be ups and downs, but this is the end goal, or the general direction at very least. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hard, solid goal, but the general direction that you want to move in. If you have that, then you're more likely to continue down that path, aren't you?
Yes, for sure.
So, do you do anything online, Jeff, or is it all in person?
Yeah, so we have our online program. It's geared towards my most recent book as a kind of a feeder to that. It's called The Yielding Warrior. And yielding is a very interesting concept. It's in the meditative arts and the martial arts. I break down yielding into three categories. We have physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that, I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now, it's obvious how this is effective and can be helpful in any kind of athletic event or endeavor that you would take on, because there's always going to be other athletes that are bigger and stronger than you. And when you can learn how to redirect that force and apply pressure where they have the least amount of resistance, it can help us be more successful. Then there was what we call mental yielding. And mental yielding is developed through the awareness. So within physical yielding, in order to be good at physical yielding, you have to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may take a lifetime to really master these skills, from day one, we start to get to the point where we can see things more clearly inside of ourselves. And now, say you and I are having a conversation, and now we're back on the mental yielding idea, and I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it from that first imbalance. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a harmonious place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. And so learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is extremely powerful. One, we're being more considerate, which is something that we could all do more of anyway. And two, it allows you to be strategic in that you can guide conversations to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance, which is beneficial in your relationships and business and sales and negotiations. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can apply this skill. Then we have what we call emotional yielding. And this is very much like mental yielding, but with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about many times something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path. And we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding, if we could have noticed that from the beginning and maybe been a little bit more from a balanced state and state of awareness when that happened, oftentimes we can sit back and evaluate the scenarios and make a better choice that sometimes can save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And I've been explaining this idea of yielding for many years, running the academy here. And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is, yielding makes a lot of sense. I use that all the time. Well, I would agree in that I think everybody uses some degree of yielding all the time, but it's kind of like, if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you that person would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And the meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that I truly believe you will never have any clue of without cultivating these kinds of practices into your life. And so this book is a feeder into my online program for teaching people how to build an evolving life practice through the meditative arts. And then I also have a teacher training program up online that, if somebody has a yoga studio or a martial arts studio, or they're a life coach and they want to learn how to integrate the meditative arts into their practice, that could be something that they could get into as well.
Cool. Is that stuff all suitable for kind of all levels, is it?
Yeah, so the personal practice, anybody could start that from a beginning stage to an advanced stage. I've got over probably 180 or 90 videos just in the beginning program up there, teaching things from Tai Chi and Qigong, from sitting meditation, energetic work, breath strategies, standing meditation, all different kinds of things. And so you can learn how to build a practice around your lifestyle and integrate things that will help you get to whatever goal you're looking to achieve.
Cool. And where is the best place for people to find all that stuff, Jeff?
That would be on my website at theyieldingwarrior.com. And if you'd like to get a free copy of my most recent book, you can go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book and just pay for shipping and handling, and we'll send you a copy of the book.
Cool. I'll make sure I drop a link in the show notes so people make it easy for them to find all that stuff for you.
Nice.
What's kind of one practical step that somebody can take now if they're interested in starting this journey, and when they finish listening to the show, what's one practical step that they can take to start on that journey?
I would go back and listen to what I told you to do on thinking about your why, and really spend a half an hour, an hour, and dive deep into that, and then find yourself a guide and get started. That would be the most beneficial to you. And when you have that strong purpose, you understand that there's consistency and commitment needed, and you have somebody that's educated that can help point you in the right direction. If you do that, you'll be successful with the practice.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's important in everything we do, I believe. So that's good advice on that one. Jeff, I'm conscious you've got commitments, so I'm going to bring the episode to a close here. Do you have any final thoughts or messages that you want to leave people with?
No, thank you very much for having me.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Take care.
Thanks again for being part of this journey. Stay tuned. We've got even more great conversations coming your way.